Right now, a stretch of water barely 100 miles wide divides two modern militaries on high alert. Just miles away from these military drills are hyper-sterile cleanrooms running 24 hours a day. A conflict here would disrupt the flow of components that power global data centers, telecommunications, and consumer electronics. A sudden halt in production would trigger a cascade of supply chain failures across the planet. This is Taiwan. It operates its own military, prints its own currency, and holds democratic elections. It functions as a sovereign state. Yet to the United Nations and the international community, it has no official status. Understanding why the world ignores a functioning democracy of 23 million people requires looking back at a history defined by exiles and colonial outposts. For 6,000 years, Taiwan was inhabited exclusively by indigenous tribes. Linguists trace the roots of languages spoken from Hawaii and New Zealand to Madagascar all the way back to these islanders, marking Taiwan as the birthplace of Pacific culture. In the 1620s, the Dutch East India Company established a trading fort here. They brought in the first major wave of Han Chinese laborers from the mainland to farm sugar and rice for export. The Dutch were eventually expelled by a fleeing pirate warlord named Koxinga, who established his own kingdom on the island after the collapse of China's Ming dynasty. When the Qing dynasty finally annexed Taiwan in 1683, they did so to dismantle this pirate haven. Qing rulers initially viewed the island as a wild, neglected frontier rather than a core territory. For centuries, Taiwan remained on the periphery, a base for indigenous tribes and naval outposts that operated largely independently from the central Chinese empire. The political fracture between the island and the mainland began in 1895. Following the First Sino-Japanese War, a defeated China ceded Taiwan to the Japanese Empire. While mainland China descended into decades of civil war and internal chaos, Japan heavily industrialized Taiwan, building a network of modern railways, schools, and hospitals. This 50-year period of Japanese modernization established a political and economic identity in Taiwan that was fundamentally distinct from the reality on the mainland. After World War II, Japan surrendered Taiwan to the Republic of China, just as Mao Zedong's communist forces were winning the civil war on the mainland. In 1949, nationalist leader Chiang Kai-shek and 1.2 million soldiers and elites fled across the strait. They established a capital in Taipei, claiming they remained the legitimate government of all of China. The conflict froze in 1950 when the U.S. Navy parked its fleet in the Taiwan Strait to block communist expansion, physically separating the two rival governments. In 1971, the diplomatic landscape shifted. The United Nations passed Resolution 2758, expelling Taiwan in favor of Beijing, to gain access to the mainland's massive markets. Most of the world chose to prioritize economic access over Taiwan's sovereignty, leaving the island in total diplomatic isolation. Lacking UN recognition or formal military allies, Taiwan's survival strategy shifted toward becoming a critical node in the global economy. This strategy centered on TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. They produce the silicon wafers that form what is now known as the silicon shield. Taiwan currently manufactures 60% of all microchips and an estimated 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors, the components required for artificial intelligence and modern military technology. This technological monopoly creates a massive incentive for the US and Europe to defend the island, using global supply chain dependencies as a primary layer of defense. China's modern approach centers on gray zone warfare, a strategy designed to achieve political goals without a full-scale military invasion. These tactics include continuous cyber attacks, targeted economic boycotts, and regular airspace incursions intended to exhaust Taiwan's military and normalize a Chinese presence around the island. 75 years after the Great Retreat, the 1949 Civil War remains an active standoff. The struggle has evolved from a battle over territory into a high-stakes competition over the advanced logic chips that power the modern world.